Adolf Hitler, a historical biography for English learners. Hello, everyone. This is Lydia from LearnEnglishPodcast.com. Today, I'm bringing you an educational biography about one of history's most notorious figures, Adolf Hitler. By watching this video, you'll not only improve your English vocabulary and listening skills, but you'll also gain important historical knowledge about a figure whose actions shaped the 20th century. This lesson combines language learning with history, helping you understand complex historical events while practicing your English comprehension. Let's begin our journey through this dark chapter of world history. Early life and background. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in a small town called Braunau am Inn in Austria-Hungary. He grew up near Linz, Austria, where his childhood began to shape the man he would become. Hitler was the son of a local customs official named Alois Hitler and his much younger third wife. His relationship with his father was notably difficult, as Alois was known to be very strict. While his mother seems to have been a kind and caring woman, his father's strictness created tension in the household. As a young man, Hitler moved to Vienna in the first decade of the 1900s. This period in Vienna was formative for Hitler, as he experienced rejection from the Academy of Fine Arts, which had been his aspiration. This rejection was a significant disappointment that would influence his later resentments. In 1913, Hitler decided to leave Austria and move to Germany, a country that would later become the center of his political ambitions. When World War I began in 1914, Hitler joined the German army, despite being Austrian by birth. During his military service, he was decorated for bravery, receiving the Iron Cross. This military experience would later become an important part of his political identity and rhetoric. Political beginnings. After Germany's defeat in World War I, Hitler, like many Germans, felt bitter and humiliated by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which placed heavy penalties on Germany. In 1919, he joined a small political group in Munich called the German Workers' Party, DAP, which was the precursor to the Nazi Party. By 1921, Hitler had taken control of this group, transforming it into the Nazi Party with himself as its leader. Hitler's early political career was marked by a failed coup attempt known as the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923. This attempted seizure of power in Munich resulted in Hitler's arrest and imprisonment. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served only about 9 months of this sentence. During his time in prison, Hitler dictated the first volume of his autobiography and political manifesto titled Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle in English. This book outlined many of his ideologies, including his belief in the superiority of what he called the Aryan race, his plans for German expansion into Eastern Europe, his opposition to democracy and support for dictatorship, his anti-Semitic views, connecting Judaism with communism, his extreme nationalist ideas. These ideas were influenced by various sources, including the writings of Arthur de Gobineau on racial inequality, Germany's territorial gains during World War I, and the anti-Semitic writings of Nazi ideologue Alfred Rosenberg. Rise to power. You're listening to LearnEnglishPodcast.com. I'm your host, Lydia, and we're learning English through the historical biography of Adolf Hitler. After his release from prison, Hitler worked to rebuild the Nazi Party. He gained popular support by attacking the Treaty of Versailles and promoting pan-Germanism, anti-Semitism, and anti-communism through charismatic speeches and Nazi propaganda. His oratorical skills allowed him to connect with many Germans who were suffering from economic hardship during the Weimar Republic era. By November 1932, the Nazi Party had become the largest party in the German Reichstag parliament, though they did not hold a majority. On January 30, 1933, former Chancellor Franz von Papen and other conservative leaders convinced President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. This appointment marked the beginning of Hitler's legal rise to dictatorial power. Shortly after becoming chancellor, Hitler and his allies pushed through the Enabling Act of 1933, which began the process of transforming the democratic Weimar Republic into Nazi Germany. By the summer of 1933, Hitler had banned all political parties except the Nazi Party, effectively creating a one-party state. Germany had become a dictatorship under Hitler's control. After the death of President Paul von Hindenburg in 1934, Hitler declared the office of president vacant and combined the powers of chancellor and president. He took the title of Führer, leader, and became both head of state and head of government, with no checks on his power. Germany was now a totalitarian fascist dictatorship, with Hitler exercising complete control. Hitler's consolidation of power included purging potential rivals, even within his own party. In the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, he ordered the murder of Ernst Röhm, the head of the SA, the Nazi Party's original paramilitary organization, along with many others. This action was carried out by Heinrich Himmler, Reinhard Heydrich, and the SS, which would become Hitler's most loyal and feared organization. Nazi Germany under Hitler's rule. Under Hitler's leadership, Nazi Germany underwent significant transformations. All media came under the control of the Nazi Party, led by propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, and was required to praise Hitler and Nazi ideology. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press were eliminated, and political opponents were imprisoned in concentration camps or killed. Hitler's government implemented policies aimed at addressing Germany's economic problems. These policies included public works programs, such as building highways, the famous Autobahn system, which helped reduce unemployment. The government also focused on rearmament, rebuilding Germany's military power in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. The Nazi regime promoted extreme nationalism and the concept of racial purity. Hitler encouraged population growth among those he considered racially desirable, promoting the idea of creating more people of the master race. At the same time, the regime began implementing increasingly harsh policies against Jews and other groups deemed undesirable. In 1938, the Nazi regime orchestrated the Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, a pogrom against Jews throughout Germany and Austria. Jewish businesses and synagogues were destroyed, and many Jews were attacked and killed. This event marked an escalation in the persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany. World War II. On September 1, 1939, Hitler ordered the German army to invade Poland, an action that is widely recognized as the beginning of World War II in Europe. The German military quickly conquered Western Poland, and in the following years, Hitler's forces would occupy much of Europe, including France and large portions of the Soviet Union. Hitler's military strategy initially brought Germany significant victories. The German Blitzkrieg, lightning war tactics, proved highly effective in the early years of the war. However, as the conflict progressed, Germany began to face increasing resistance and setbacks, particularly after the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 and the entry of the United States into the war following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Remember, you're watching LearnEnglishPodcast.com with me, Lydia. We're learning English through historical content about Adolf Hitler and World War II. As the war continued, Hitler became increasingly involved in military decision-making, often overruling his generals. Many historians believe that his interference in military matters contributed to Germany's eventual defeat. By 1944, the war was going badly for Germany on multiple fronts. The Holocaust. One of the darkest aspects of Hitler's rule was the systematic persecution and murder of Jews and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. This genocide, known as the Holocaust, resulted in the deaths of approximately 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, including Roma, Gypsies, homosexuals, Slavic peoples, particularly Poles and Russians, and political opponents. The persecution began with discriminatory laws that excluded Jews from German society. Jews were not allowed to own businesses or attend certain schools. Many were arrested and sent to concentration camps. As Nazi Germany conquered more territory, the persecution expanded to Jews throughout occupied Europe. During the war, Hitler escalated his campaign against the Jews. The Nazis established a network of concentration camps and death camps where millions were killed in gas chambers or died from starvation, disease, and forced labor. This industrialized mass murder represents one of the most horrific chapters in human history. The Holocaust was not merely the result of wartime conditions, but was a deliberate policy of extermination, planned and implemented by the Nazi regime under Hitler's leadership. It reflected the anti-Semitic ideology that Hitler had expressed years earlier in Mein Kampf and in his speeches. Final days and death. By early 1945, Germany was facing defeat on all fronts. Allied forces were advancing from the west, while Soviet forces were pushing in from the east. Hitler retreated to a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, known as the Führer Bunker. As Soviet forces closed in on Berlin in April 1945, Hitler gave most of the bunker staff permission to leave. Many did so, using planes and truck convoys to escape to the region of Berchtesgaden. However, Hitler himself remained in the bunker, along with his longtime companion Eva Braun, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels and his family, and a few others. On April 29, 1945, with Soviet forces just blocks away from the bunker, Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief civil ceremony. The next day, on April 30, 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Eva Braun took cyanide poison, while Hitler shot himself in the head after also taking cyanide. Before their deaths, Hitler had ordered that their bodies be burned to prevent them from being captured by Soviet forces. Shortly after Hitler's death, Germany surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces. The war in Europe officially ended on May 8, 1945. Hitler's legacy and historical impact. Adolf Hitler's 12-year rule left an indelible mark on world history. The Second World War, which he initiated, resulted in the deaths of an estimated 50 million people worldwide, including 28.7 million soldiers and 19.3 million civilians and prisoners of war. The Holocaust, which he orchestrated, represents one of the most horrific genocides in human history. Hitler's actions led to the complete destruction of Nazi Germany, with the country divided into occupation zones after the war. The aftermath of World War II also saw the beginning of the Cold War between the Western powers and the Soviet Union, which would shape global politics for decades to come. Historian Ian Kershaw, who wrote a comprehensive biography of Hitler, describes him as a modern symbol of evil. Kershaw notes that never in history has such ruination been linked with the name of one man. However, Kershaw and other historians also emphasize the importance of examining the broader historical context and societal conditions in Germany that allowed Hitler to rise to power, rather than focusing solely on Hitler as an individual. The study of Hitler's rise to power serves as a warning about the dangers of extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the fragility of democratic institutions. It demonstrates how a democratic system can be subverted from within and transformed into a totalitarian dictatorship. Hitler's early influences and worldview. To understand Hitler's actions, it's important to examine the influences that shaped his worldview. His anti-Semitism appears to have developed during his time in Vienna, where he was exposed to anti-Semitic literature and political movements. His experiences in World War I and the aftermath of Germany's defeat further radicalized his views. Hitler's ideology combined several elements: extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, social Darwinism, and the concept of living space, Lebensraum, for the German people. He believed that Germany needed to expand eastward to acquire more territory for its population, which would come at the expense of Slavic peoples whom he considered racially inferior. His political skills included remarkable oratorical abilities that allowed him to connect with mass audiences. He understood the power of propaganda and spectacle, which he used effectively to build support for the Nazi Party. His leadership style was authoritarian and charismatic, inspiring fanatical loyalty among his followers. You're still with LearnEnglishPodcast.com. I'm Lydia, helping you improve your English while learning about this crucial historical period. Hitler's government and inner circle. Hitler surrounded himself with a group of loyal followers who helped implement his policies. These included Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, who controlled all media and cultural expressions in Nazi Germany; Heinrich Himmler, who led the SS and oversaw the concentration camp system; Hermann Göring, who commanded the Luftwaffe, Air Force, and was initially designated as Hitler's successor; Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy until his flight to Scotland in 1941. Martin Bormann, who became Hitler's private secretary and controlled access to him. Albert Speer, Hitler's architect and later Minister of Armaments and War Production. Reinhard Heydrich, who was one of the main architects of the Holocaust until his assassination in 1942. Hitler's leadership style was often chaotic, with different Nazi officials competing for his favor. He would often give overlapping responsibilities to different people, creating a system where loyalty to him personally was more important than organizational efficiency. Hitler's military leadership. As the supreme commander of the German armed forces, Hitler took an increasingly active role in military planning as the war progressed. Initially, his intuitive strategic decisions brought Germany success, reinforcing his belief in his military genius. However, as the war continued, his refusal to allow tactical retreats, insistence on holding untenable positions, and interference in operational details contributed to Germany's military defeats. Some of Hitler's most significant military decisions included the invasion of Poland in 1939, which started World War II, the decision to attack westward in 1940, resulting in the defeat of France; Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941; the declaration of war against the United States after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor; the refusal to allow the German Sixth Army to retreat from Stalingrad in 1942-43, resulting in its destruction; the decision to launch the Battle of the Bulge offensive in December 1944. Hitler's military leadership was characterized by bold gambles that initially paid off, but eventually led to overextension of German forces and ultimate defeat. Cultural and social policies. Beyond his military and racial policies, Hitler's regime also implemented significant cultural and social changes in Germany. The Nazi concept of Gleichschaltung, coordination, meant bringing all aspects of society under Nazi control. Education was reformed to emphasize Nazi ideology, physical fitness, and racial theories. Universities were purged of Jewish professors and those deemed politically unreliable. Art and culture were strictly controlled, with modern and degenerate art suppressed in favor of classical and Germanic styles. The Hitler Youth Organization was established to indoctrinate German children and teenagers in Nazi ideology. Membership eventually became mandatory for all racially acceptable German youth. Girls were directed toward the League of German Girls, which prepared them for their future roles as wives and mothers. Women were generally encouraged to focus on the 3 Ks: Kinder, Küche, Kirche, children, kitchen, church. The Nazi regime promoted large families among racially valuable Germans through financial incentives and propaganda glorifying motherhood. International relations under Hitler. Hitler's approach to international relations was guided by his ideological goals and his assessment of power dynamics. Initially, he presented himself as a man of peace while secretly rearming Germany. The international community's policy of appeasement, exemplified by the Munich Agreement of 1938, allowed Hitler to achieve many of his early territorial goals without war. Key moments in Hitler's foreign policy included the remilitarization of the Rhineland in 1936, violating the Treaty of Versailles, the Anschluss, annexation of Austria in March 1938, the Munich Agreement, which gave Germany the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia in September 1938, the complete occupation of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union in August 1939, which included secret protocols dividing Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. The invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, which triggered World War II. Hitler's diplomatic strategy often involved making demands, creating crises, and then appearing reasonable by temporarily scaling back those demands only to make new demands later. Psychological perspectives. Historians and psychologists have long debated Hitler's psychological makeup. While it's impossible to diagnose someone posthumously with certainty, various theories have been proposed about his mental state. Some have suggested that Hitler may have had borderline personality disorder. Others have pointed to his extreme narcissism, paranoia, and inability to form normal human relationships. His increasing isolation during the war years, combined with possible health problems, may have affected his decision-making. Hitler was known for his explosive temper tantrums, yet also for his ability to charm those he met in private settings. This duality, the public demagogue and the private individual, has fascinated and puzzled historians. It's important to note that psychological explanations, while interesting, do not diminish Hitler's moral responsibility for his actions. Understanding the psychological factors that may have influenced him does not excuse or minimize the enormous suffering he caused. The world after Hitler. The defeat of Nazi Germany led to significant changes in the world order. Europe lay in ruins, with millions dead and displaced. The Holocaust had forever changed Jewish life in Europe and accelerated the movement for the creation of Israel as a Jewish state. Germany itself was divided into occupation zones controlled by the victorious Allied powers, eventually leading to the creation of 2 separate German states, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, and the German Democratic Republic, East Germany. These 2 states would not be reunified until 1990, long after Hitler's death. The exposure of Nazi crimes led to the Nuremberg trials, where surviving Nazi leaders were tried for crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. These trials established important precedents in international law regarding individual responsibility for state-sponsored crimes. The post-war world also saw the establishment of the United Nations, partly as a response to the failure of the League of Nations to prevent World War II. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the UN in 1948, was influenced by the determination to prevent atrocities like those committed by the Nazi regime. Conclusion. Adolf Hitler remains one of history's most studied and reviled figures. His 12-year rule brought unprecedented destruction and suffering to Europe and the world. The Holocaust, which he orchestrated, stands as one of humanity's darkest chapters. His aggressive expansionism led to the most destructive war in human history. Understanding Hitler's rise to power and the conditions that made it possible remains crucial for preventing similar tragedies in the future. His ability to transform a democratic system into a totalitarian dictatorship serves as a warning about the fragility of democratic institutions and the dangers of extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and authoritarianism. As we conclude this English lesson on Adolf Hitler, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through this difficult but important historical topic. Learning about history in English helps us not only improve our language skills, but also gain insights into the human condition and the importance of standing against hatred and tyranny. This has been Lydia from LearnEnglishPodcast.com. If you found this lesson valuable for both your English learning and historical knowledge, please subscribe to our channel for more educational content. By subscribing to LearnEnglishPodcast.com, you'll get access to more lessons that combine language learning with important knowledge about our world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in our next lesson.